Spoilers ahead.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Spider, and welcome back to another movie review. Now, last year, I reviewed the film The Lost World from 1925, which is one of the most famous works of stop-motion animator Willis O'Brien. Well, today, I'm taking a look at his most famous work and one of the most influential movies of all time, King Kong from 1933. Also, if you missed my Lost World review, there should be a link to it in the description below. Might even be a link on screen right now. Anyways, before we dive into this review, I want to give a little bit of a background on this film and how it came to be.
While the movie was directed by both Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, it was really Cooper's brainchild. He had been fascinated with gorillas for most of his life and wanted to make a film about them for years, but he could never get anyone to greenlight it. However, he finally got his chance with King Kong. But then he ran into a new problem. He couldn't figure out how to bring the animal to life. The studio wanted him to use a guy in a suit, but Cooper didn't care much for that idea. He thought about using a real gorilla, but that didn't work out either. Finally, while working together on the cancelled film Creation, Cooper realized that Willis O'Brien's stop motion was just the trick he was looking for.
And thus, we got today's film.
Fun fact, the film was originally titled The Beast, and so they came up with the name Kong, which comes from the word Congo. Cooper really liked the name and thought it sounded sharp and strong, although the king part of King Kong wouldn't be added until much later.
Neat. You know what's not neat? None of the info is on this DVD. Seriously, almost 3 hours of behind-the-scenes content, and never once does it mention the origin of Kong's name. It's a bit odd.
Alright, enough background on the film. Let's start the review. For a quick synopsis, a crew sets sail to a mysterious place known as Skull Island to film an action-adventure movie, only to find themselves in a real adventure as the island is home to many prehistoric nightmares.
So if that sounds interesting, join me in my review of the original King Kong.
The movie begins with a quote that is said to be an old Arabian proverb, but in reality was just made up by Cooper himself. It then opens on a dock, with a man asking if this is the ship with Carl Denham on it. The other man says it is, and asks if he'll be joining the crazy voyage. The first man asks why he says it's crazy. The second mentions the strange cargo, and the number of crew on the ship.
Not enough men to handle her? Not enough. 3 times more than the ship needs.
On board the ship, we see some of our main characters. Carl Denham, played by Robert Armstrong, and the captain of the ship, Englehorn, played by Frank Raker. We learn that Denham is a filmmaker, and that they are on a voyage to film his next picture. But they have to hurry before a monsoon starts, and before the marshal detains them after finding out about the ship's cargo.
What do you think the marshal will say to these new gas bombs of yours? According to you, one of them is enough to knock out an elephant.
The two are then joined by the man from before, who is Denham's casting agent, Weston. We are also introduced to Jack Driscoll, the first mate, played by Bruce Cabot. Weston says that he can't get a girl for Denham's new film. Carl gets frustrated at this because no agency will send him someone to play his leading lady, and Weston was his last chance. Weston tells him that the reason no one will send him a gal is because his pictures are known to be dangerous, and he's being especially secretive about this current project.
Good Lord, you talk as if I never brought anybody back alive.
Weston asks Denham why he even wants a woman for his film, as he's never had one in any of his others. He says it's because even though his other pictures were successful, the biggest complaint he always gets is that there's never any romance in them, so he's finally given the people what they want. But with Weston and everyone else refusing to cast anyone for him, Denham decides to go out and find a girl on his own. So he searches the streets of New York, but can't find anyone. After a while, he goes to a fruit stand, and at the same time, a woman attempts to take an apple from the stand, but is caught by the owner.
Now I'll catch a cop. You like that, huh?
No, I didn't. Let me go. I wanted to, but I didn't.
Denham tells the guy to ease off, but he says that he's already been stolen from 3 times this week.
Yeah, you gotta remember, this was during the Great Depression, so everyone was on some pretty hard times.
Denham gives the guy a buck, and he leaves. The woman then nearly faints, but is caught by Denham. And when he gets a good look at her face, he realizes that she's purty, so he takes her to a diner. We learn that her name is Ann Darrow, played by Fay Wray. Fun fact, Fay Wray is actually a natural brunette, but she was insistent on the character being blonde, so she wore a wig for the movie.
Or they always wanted the character to be blonde, and that's why she wore a wig? I don't know, there are conflicting stories, but I heard Anne being blonde was Fay Wray's idea from an actual interview with the actress, so I'm willing to go with that.
Anywho, Back in the film, after finding out that Anne has some experience with acting, Denham asks if she'll join his new movie. It does take a bit to convince her, but after realizing that going on a voyage and being in a movie is probably better than just sitting here being too broke to feed herself, she agrees. And so they ship out in the morning to begin their adventure. As they're leaving the docks, Jack meets Anne and the two get to know each other.
I think this is awfully exciting. I've never been on a ship before.
Well, I've never been on one with a woman before.
I guess you don't think much of women on ships, do you?
No, they're a nuisance.
Well, I'll try not to be.
You've been on the way already.
Boy, way to put on the charm.
They meet up again later, where she tells him that she's been busy setting up some test shots with Denham to see which side of her is more photogenic.
Both sides look all right to me.
Aw, see, you can be nice.
But it doesn't last long, as it goes right back to demeaning her again.
Oh, you're all right, but women just can't help being a bother. Made that way, I guess.
Yep, this movie's from the 1930s, alright.
There's also a random monkey on board, who seems to be fond of Anne.
Foreshadowing?
Jack then talks to Denham about where they're going, as he hasn't even told them their destination yet, just vague coordinates. Jack is mainly focused on safety concerns, not so much for himself, but for Anne. Denham then tells him to be careful about falling for such a beauty, as it could make him soft.
What are you talking about?
It's the idea of my picture. A beast was a tough guy, too. He could lick the world. But when he saw beauty, she got him. He went soft. He forgot his wisdom, and the little fellas licked him.
Carl then finally tells the crew where they're going. He tells them that they're heading towards an island in the southwest. Engelhorn tries to find it on a chart, but Denham tells him he won't find it there, for this island is relatively undiscovered. Some time ago, a canoe of islanders was found at sea and got picked up by a ship. They had all died before they could reach port, but not before drawing a map of their home as well as rough coordinates of where it lies. Denham was able to get a hold of this map because he's a friend of the captain of that ship. He also tells them that on the island is a wall, blocking off the village from the rest of the island. And though the villages have fallen from the people who originally built it, they still keep the wall in repair.
Why?
There's something on the other side of it. Something they fear.
The ship crew think it might just be something as simple as a rival tribe on the other side of the wall. But Denham has another idea.
Did you ever hear of Kong?
Why, yes. Some native superstition, isn't it? A god or a spirit or something.
Well, anyway, neither beast nor man.
Denham believes that whatever inspired the legend of Kong is still there on that island, and he intends to photograph it.
Suppose it doesn't like having its picture taken.
Well, now you know why I brought along those cases of gas bombs.
Now, before we move on any further, there's something I want to talk about here, and that is, they know about Kong. Like Engelhorn, he's heard stories about Kong before even stepping foot on the island. That's kind of interesting. It's like the story of the beast is so grand that it's reached beyond the island's borders. But in a lot of the remakes and spin-offs, they don't really use this idea. The characters don't know anything about Kong until after they've reached the island. They've never even heard the name before. But here, Kong he's almost like the Kraken, or Kraken, however you want to pronounce it, where they're like this urban legend that most people have at least heard about. It's a neat idea, and I hope they bring it back someday.
The next scene is of Denham and Anne doing some test shots. During this, Anne asks if he always does his own camera work. He tells her that he used to have a cameraman, but they weren't reliable enough for him.
I'd have got a swell picture of a charging rhino, but the cameraman got scared. That darn fool, I was right there with a rifle. Seems he didn't trust me to get the rhino before it got him. I'm fooled with cameraman sense to do it myself.
Now, an interesting thing to note is that Carl Denham and Jack Driscoll were both heavily based on the directors of the film, with Carl mostly based on Cooper and Driscoll mostly based on Schoedsack. The two had both been on a lot of crazy endeavors and traveled all over the world, just like the characters in the movie are supposed to have. The scene continues, and Denham has Anne pretend that she's looking at something.
Now look higher. Still higher. Now you see it. You're amazed. You can't believe it.
He goes on to explain how unimaginable and horrifying this pretend thing is, and how she is paralyzed with fear, but must scream.
Throw your arms across your eyes and scream, Anne. Scream for your life.
What's he think she's really gonna see?
Apparently, at one point, it was suggested that this sequence be cut out, but Marion C. Cooper was insistent that it stay in. And honestly, I agree with that decision. It really helps build the suspense, and it's as Jack says, what does he think she's really gonna see? It makes the audience wonder just what type of things we're about to see on the island.
Later on, they are nearing where the island should be, but can't see anything because of a fog. Then, they hear drums beating in the distance, so they follow the sound out of the fog and find Skull Island. There's some nice little animated birdies flying across it. Also, just as Skull Island comes into view, the music starts.
I mention that here specifically because after the opening credits, there has been no music in the movie so far. It only starts once they reach the island.
King Kong was also one of the first films to have a full orchestra score. And while a lot of other movies at the time would just use some stock music, this film has a completely original soundtrack composed by Max Steiner, who was a pioneer in film scores.
Apparently, the reason why a lot of movies from these times didn't use a musical score is because filmmakers thought audiences would think it'd be silly or would wonder where the music was supposed to be coming from. Man, could you imagine a world where that mentality continued? Think of how many music scores we would have lost. Ugh, horrible thought. Also, according to IMDb, King Kong is the very first film to be recorded on 3 tracks. 1 for dialogue, 1 for music, and 1 for sound effects. Yeah, both score and sound design were kind of in their infancy during this time, so that's another way why King Kong is an innovator.
They decide to go ashore, and the captain goes along with them, as he might be able to communicate with the natives. After reaching the beach, they head towards the village, and as they get closer, they can hear chanting. Denham asks if Englehorn can understand anything yet, and he says it sounds similar to that of the Neas Islands.
But in reality, the language was completely made up for the film, which, according to the commentary track on this DVD, stop-motion animator Ray Harryhausen found out in kind of a funny way.
The first native I met who was standing on the pier, I went up to him and I said, "Bala, bala kom nonohi." And he put his hands on his hip and in perfect English he said, "What are you talking about?"
As the group nears the wall, they see a ceremony taking place. Denham tries to get a shot of it, but is spotted by the native chief, played by Noble Johnson. He stops the ceremony, and all the natives turn to see their new visitors. Speaking of the natives, unlike The Lost World, they use actual black actors to portray the islanders here.
Well, most of them anyways. Some blackface was still used in the film. However, instead of using white actors, they opted to use Hispanic and Native American performers, which is better? Kinda? Not really.
Anyways, after being seen, Denham says to come out into the open, as there's no point in hiding anymore. The chief approaches our characters, and Englehorn tries to communicate with him. They are able to understand each other, and Denham has the captain ask about the ceremony. The chief says that they are giving a bride to Kong, but that it's been ruined because the group has seen it. The chief then sees Anne, who he calls the Golden Woman, due to her blonde hair. He tries to trade 6 of his women for Anne, which our characters obviously refuse. This makes the islanders upset, so the group thinks it'd be smart to head back to the ship. It is now night, and we get another moment between Anne and Jack, where he talks about how worried he was for her on the island.
Say, I guess I love you.
Wait, what? What the heck is he talking about? This entire voyage he's been saying non-stop how Anne's very presence is a nuisance. And now, suddenly he's in love with her?
Why, Jack, you hate women.
See, even Anne is confused by this.
Love her. He barely knows her. Like, we don't get an exact number of how long the trip has been, but going by the novel, it was around 6 weeks. That's less than 2 months. That's not a lot of time to fall in love with someone. Like, I can buy that he's catching feelings for her, sure, but in love? Especially with how blatant he was about his dislike of women earlier. It just feels very abrupt.
Anyways, they share a kiss, but Driscoll is called away to the bridge, so he doesn't see when some of the natives row over to the ship and kidnap Anne. And it's not before too long that they notice she's missing, and when Charlie the cook finds a tribal bracelet on the ship, he realizes what happened and calls everyone to the deck.
Look, sir, me find on deck.
Native bracelet.
Crazy black man been here.
Okay. I know I probably shouldn't be laughing at that, but dang it if it doesn't make me laugh every time. It's just so jarring. Like, wow, they actually made him say that.
Putting two and two together, the crew get ready and head back to the island to rescue Anne. Meanwhile, in the village, the ceremony is in full swing as they prepare Anne to be sacrificed. And that's not the only thing in full swing. Listen to this music. The natives move the bar out of the way and open these massive doors. They then tie Anne to a podium and head back through the wall. They close the doors and await for the arrival of Kong. Fun fact, the way this effect was done was by filming a miniature wall and having the performers projected onto the shot, while what they were really standing on was a soundstage.
Well, we're over 40 minutes into the film, so it's high time the big guy himself finally makes an appearance.
Kong unties Anne and heads off into the jungle with his new bride. The sailors from the ship finally show up, but they are only in time to catch the backside of the beast. Also, I like the face that Jack makes here. He looks less shocked or scared, and more like he just accidentally walked in on someone using the toilet.
Now, before we continue on, I want to talk a little bit about just how they made the titular character.
King Kong was brought to life with an 18-inch maquette that was designed by Willis O'Brien and constructed by Marcel Delgado, and then filmed by O'Brien using stop motion. Also, if you don't know what stop motion is, I'll explain it here, as I didn't really talk about it much in my review of The Lost World.
It's actually pretty similar to cartoon animation. Basically, you take a figure, move them a little bit, take a picture, move them a little bit, take a picture, move them a little bit, take a picture, and when you play this all back, it makes them look like they're moving all on their own. It's pretty neat.
Back in the film, the sailors open the doors back up and head out into the jungle to find Anne. Going with is Jack and Denham, while Englehorn stays behind at the wall with some others. They follow Kong's footprints, but on their way they come across another creature. It is a Stegosaurus, and it spots the sailors and charges at them, so they throw a gas bomb at it and shoot it to death. They then continue their pursuit of the giant gorilla, but Kong passes through a body of water, so the group builds a raft and heads out into it. However, while in the water they draw the attention of another dinosaur, a Brontosaurus, which attacks them and destroys their raft. Even as they flee, it continues its assault.
Also, because it came out of the water, you might assume that this is actually supposed to be a plesiosaur and not a Brontosaurus.
But nope, goes on land, it's got legs.
Then why was it in the water?
After doing some research, I learned that up until the 1970s, scientists believed that long-necked type dinosaurs spent most of their time in the water due to their large size.
The more you know.
The Brontosaurus goes on to chase them out of the water and onto land. Even this poor guy who tried to hide in a tree can't escape from the behemoth.
Now, some people did complain that the Brontosaurus, or herbivore, bit and killed some of the sailors. And you know, I feel like these are the same people who don't realize how many humans hippos kill per year. Here's a hint. It's significantly higher than sharks. And even lions, for that matter.
Yeah, just because something is a herbivore doesn't necessarily make it harmless. Besides, it's not like it ate the sailors. As soon as they were dead, it spit them out. Even after the Brontosaurus had stopped chasing them, the group still runs for their lives. We then see Kong again, who crosses a log and sets Anne onto a nearby tree. The sailors cross the same log, and in doing so run headfirst into Kong, so they go back across the log. Kong then grabs it and shakes the log, causing the sailors to fall to their deaths.
Now, some of you may be wondering, why didn't they just go back across the log before Kong picked it up? Well, the answer lies in a deleted scene. See, the reason they went across the log in the first place is because they were being chased by a Strachosaurus. So the original idea was they had Kong on one side of the log and the Strachosaurus on the other, and they were trapped in the middle. That's why they couldn't get off.
And you can still find images of this scrap scene on the internet. Also, while the others died, Jack managed to climb onto the cliff and sit safely in an indention in the wall. But Kong is still able to spot him and tries to grab at Jack. Driscoll responds by stabbing Kong's hand with a knife. And then some two-legged lizard thing starts scaling the wall using a vine, so Jack uses some quick thinking and just cuts the vine, causing the lizard to fall back from whence it came.
Also, there's a bit of a funny reason as to why the creature only has 2 legs. It's because Marcel Delgado just didn't have enough time to finish it before O'Brien needed to film the scene, so he just shot it as it was.
Meanwhile, back with Anne, a dinosaur spots her, which causes her to scream. This catches the attention of Kong, who rushes back to her and attacks the...
So there actually is a bit of confusion around just what the carnivore is supposed to be. Cooper consistently referred to it as an Allosaurus, but O'Brien based it off of a T-Rex. So I'm just going to play it safe and refer to it by its official name, the Meat Eater. Or at least that's what the novel called it.
Anyways, the two colossal beasts tackle, bite, and toss each other across the jungle. Also, I've always loved the way their tails swayed back and forth in this shot. The conflict gets so chaotic that they knock over the tree Anne was in. Kong eventually gets the meat eater onto its back and breaks their jaw in a brutal fashion. I also like this scene where Kong kind of starts to play with the meat eater's jaw. I don't know if Kong's trying to make sure they're dead or if it's just curiosity, but either way, it's a nice touch.
And this fight is easily one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, and even after all these years, it's still a real joy to watch.
And after defeating his foe, King Kong roars victoriously.
Fun fact, King Kong's roar was created by combining both the roars of a lion and a tiger, slowing it down, and then playing it backwards.
Kong then picks up Anne and heads further into the jungle. Now, they didn't just use stop motion to portray King Kong, they also constructed some full-scale parts too. They made a head and shoulders, a leg, and an arm, and the head alone took 3 people to operate. And just like with the smaller models, they were all sculpted by Marcel Delgado. Back in the movie, Jack is able to climb up since Kong is gone now. We also see that Denham managed to survive as well. Jack tells him to head back to the others while he continues to follow Kong. Also, there's this neat shot that happens when Jack walks up to the meat eater. You can see he's live action here, then boom, switched over to animation.
That's cool.
Kong then heads to his home at Skull Mountain, with Jack hot on his heels.
And hey, remember Creation, that scrapped film I mentioned at the beginning of the review? Well, a lot of the miniature sets and even some of the dinosaur maquettes that were made for it wound up being used for this movie. Even some of the action sequences that were planned for Creation wound up being reformatted and used for King Kong.
Like the scene where Kong knocks all the people off a log. That was an idea originally made for Creation. Although in that movie it was supposed to be a prehistoric rhino, with a name I can't pronounce, that knocks all the people off a log. Also, just like how the miniature sets were reused, the full-scale jungle sets were also reused from another movie the directors were working on at the same time, The Most Dangerous Game from 1932. They also reused a few of the actors as well. Inside his home, Kong sits Anne down and walks away. But just as he does, a serpent slithers its way up to her, although Kong is able to stop it before it gets to Anne. And there's this blink and you'll miss it bit where if you look closely, you can see Kong pick something up. And apparently, it's a flower. That's why his back was turned to Anne in the first place, because he's picking some flowers for her.
That's a real neat detail, and it's so easily missed too. It shows just how much care and attention O'Brien put into his animation.
Kong fights the creature, which might be a plesiosaur? I'm not sure. And he kind of struggles with it for a while because it keeps wrapping around his neck. He eventually does get it off of him, and then repeatedly slams it into the ground. I love how you can feel how frustrated and kind of fed up Kong is with this thing as he smashes it. The big gorilla then grabs Anne and moves over to a different part of his home. He then looks out from his perch and roars out for all of the island to hear while pounding his chest.
Now, while real gorillas do in fact pound their chests, it's a little different than in this movie. See, Kong does it with a closed fist, but gorillas do it with an open palm. And it makes just the most ridiculous noise. I guess the old saying is right. Sometimes reality truly is stranger than fiction.
Kong then starts ripping some of Anne's clothes off and sniffing them. Okay, while the scene can come off as inappropriate, I think it was explained away that Kong here is being more curious than anything else. It's still a bit awkward, though. Anyways, Jack accidentally knocks over a rock, so he has to hide, while Kong looks for what caused the noise. And back on the perch, Anne gets attacked by a pterodactyl.
Man, this poor girl can't be alone for more than 5 seconds without something on this island trying to kill her.
Also, if you look way in the background, you can see the SS Venture.
Huh, nifty.
After hearing her cries, Kong once again rushes to her rescue and kills the pterodactyl. But as he's distracted, Jack grabs Anne and the two escape. Once Kong notices she's gone, he roars in anger and chases after them. The two manage to make it all the way back to the wall. However, they don't have much time to rest, as Kong shows up and starts banging on the doors, so everyone, including the natives, try their best to keep the doors closed. And during the chaos, this guy falls over and his wig gets caught and taken off his head. Also, I like how you can actually see the little animated models through the gaps in the door as Kong is pushing it in. Despite everyone working together, the wooden beam holding the doors closed starts to break.
Now, some people might ask, if the natives wanted to keep Kong out, why on earth would they build doors big enough for him to fit through? Well, the answer's obvious. So we can have this shot.
So everyone runs for their lives as Kong goes on a rampage and destroys the village, and those unfortunate enough not to get away in time. This shot is actually kind of similar to one from another movie the directors worked on, just with a giant gorilla instead of an elven stampede.
I guess they liked it so much they used it twice.
Kong continues to chase them all the way to the shore of the island, but Denim is able to grab one of the gas bombs and throws it at the beast, which is enough to knock out the colossal gorilla. With Kong out cold, Denim gets the idea to bring him back with them to civilization. Because it went so well the last time.
We're millionaires, boys. I'll share it with all of you. Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway. Kong, the eighth wonder of the world!
Next thing we know, we're back in New York with Denim's show already in progress.
It's a little convenient they just completely skipped over how they got Kong to New York, but whatever.
We see the audience head into the building and start speculating about just what they're about to see, as Denim has kept a tight lid on things.
Well, you would come, and these tickets cost me $20.
$20? Just for inflation, that'd be like over $500 today.
Well, that's a lot of cheese.
Backstage, Denim is getting things ready, and we see that both Anne and Jack are both part of the show as well. He then goes out to address the crowd and reveals what he has brought back.
Look at Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
Denim then introduces the couple, but as the reporters take pictures, the flash of their cameras upset Kong. Noticing this, Denim tries to get them to stop, but they carry on anyways, continuing to anger Kong until... everyone panics as the beast escapes and bursts out into the streets of New York.
Now, something interesting they did here is they created another larger Kong model for the New York scenes, where his height was increased to 24 inches. This was done so that he wouldn't feel too small against the large city buildings.
Kong then starts searching for Anne and winds up climbing a building. Looking inside, he sees a woman and thinking she's Anne, reaches in and pulls her out of bed. However, upon realizing she's not the woman he's looking for, Jack and Anne seek refuge in the room, only to be spotted by Kong, who nabs Anne and continues to scale the building. Kong then moves throughout the city and comes across a railway track, which he destroys, causing a train to crash, and then Kong bashes it in even further. Why? Upset him, I guess, I don't know.
Now, neat thing I learned is that this entire sequence of Kong attacking the train was added in way late into production. Apparently, when they added up the rough cut of Kong, it only came out to be 13 reels. Because people are superstitious, they thought, well, we can't have that, so they added in this bit, which is kind of an odd reasoning, but hey, I'm not complaining because it gives this scene, and it's pretty cool.
Kong then starts climbing the Empire State Building, and the authorities realize the only way to get Kong now is with fighter planes. Once reaching the top of the building, Kong puts Anne down, and she smoothly transitions from animation to live action.
Now, while the final act of this movie has been pretty similar to The Lost World so far, where with a colossal prehistoric creature being captured, brought back to civilization, only for it to escape and go on a rampage, there is one massive difference between the two films. The animal does not get a happy ending this time around.
The plane starts circling the building and continuously firing upon Kong. And while he does manage to knock some of them out of the sky, the more they hit him, the weaker he gets. Until he can no longer hold on, and he falls.
Now, a kind of funny thing to note here is that the pilots of the plane that shoot down Kong are the directors of the movie.
That's Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack. And it wasn't Cooper's first time in a plane either, as he was a pilot during World War I. Back in the film, as Kong lies dead in the street, Denham looks upon the fallen animal.
The airplane's got him. Oh, no. It wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty killed the beast.
And with that, the movie ends.
So that was the original King Kong from 1933. Does it still hold up after all these years? Yeah, I'd say so.
To start, the story of the film is executed very well. It's not overly convoluted, but not too simple either. The characters are enjoyable, and even Kong himself was done well. So much so that you actually kind of feel bad for him by the end of the movie. But then you remember all those villagers he massacred, and you feel a little less bad. Now, it's not perfect. The film does have some flaws. For one, I feel like the romance between Anne and Jack was kinda weak. But the biggest flaws of the film probably have to be the unfortunately dated parts that are a result of the time it was released. But thankfully, they don't take up large quantities of the film.
Moving on to the acting, and I'd say it was also well done. Though it is a 1930s movie, so some of the dialogue does still kind of have that kind of quality to it, which some people can't take, but don't bother me none.
My favorite performances are Anne and Carl Denham. Anne because, well, Fay Wray is just a good actress. She's quite talented in conveying emotions and thoughts through just her expression without having to speak. I guess there's a reason she appeared in like 10 films in 1933 alone. The woman's good at what she does.
But if I had to pick just one complaint, it would probably be that yeah.
Anne screams so much throughout this film. And it is a realistic reaction. In fact, if I was in her shoes, I'd probably be screaming just as much, if not more. But man, does it start to grate on the ears after a while.
I mean, after Anne gets taken by Kong, I think she only has like 3 or 4 lines of actual dialogue in the remainder of the film, and the rest is just screaming.
And I like Carl Denham because he's just fun to watch, and quite charismatic, even if he does tend to act before he thinks.
The effects of the movie have also aged well, and you can really see that O'Brien's animation had definitely improved from The Lost World, which makes sense, it had been almost 10 years.
And while some of the effects do look a bit wonky, like when the sailors fall into the crevice and their bodies bounce off the ground, or when Kong is falling off the Empire State Building and he's bouncing off the corners of it, it can become unintentionally funny, but I'd say most of the effects do look good, or at the very least, are still a lot of fun to watch. Now, just like The Lost World, King Kong has a lot of composite shots, having both live-action footage and animation on screen at the same time, and there's quite a few different methods they use to do it.
One method they used was they would film the live-action footage and the animation, and there was a special camera that would splice the two together, and they just hoped everything would line up properly, because if it didn't, they would have to shoot the whole thing over again.
Another one was they would have a big screen and project the animation onto it, and they would have the actors in front of it reacting to it. So the performers didn't just have to use their imagination, they could actually see what their characters were supposed to be seeing. A few examples of this is the Stegosaurus encounter, as well as Anne reacting to Kong fighting the meat eater.
Then there was another method that was created by Willis O'Brien for the film. The way it was done is that they would have the live footage filmed ahead of time, and while doing the animation, there would be a little space on the miniature set that would be left blank, and they would project the footage onto that space. And so as they would film the animation frame by frame, they would move the live footage frame by frame, and they'd be filmed together.
The most impressive composite shot in the film, at least in my opinion, is probably in Skull Mountain, where you have Kong being animated in the middle, and being projected into one corner and Jack in another, you have a pool of bubbling something spliced into the front, and fog added into the shot as well. The amount of things you would have to keep track of in this shot alone is ridiculous, and it came out looking amazing. Some of these effects may seem quaint today, but back then, these were groundbreaking techniques they were using. King Kong was a spectacle.
And it wasn't just popular among giant monster fans. Everybody loved King Kong. It was massively successful, and would continue to be so for a very long time, as they would re-release it in theaters every few years or so. And every time they did, it made a crap ton of money.
In fact, it was so successful that Marion C. Cooper would wind up becoming the head of RKO, the company that made King Kong. The movie also has a history with deleted scenes. When it was re-released in theaters in 1938, a lot of the scenes were removed. Stuff like Kong biting people, ripping Anne's clothes, and dropping that poor lady to her death were all considered too graphic. So, for years, 29 scenes over 4 minutes of the film was just gone. But, thankfully, a copy of the original reel was found in England and was able to be restored.
And that's actually the version of the movie I have here on this DVD.
However, there are still some deleted scenes that are lost, even to this day. Ones that never even made it to theaters. And the most infamous of them all is the Lost Spider Pit sequence. This takes place after the sailors have been knocked off the log, and while in the ravine, a group of creepy critters would come out, attack, and eat them. All that have been found of this are some stills from a magazine and concept art. The sequence was removed because it was deemed too shocking, and it slowed down the film. And it, and all the others, may remain lost for the rest of time, as people didn't really think about archiving stuff like this back then. It's a real shame.
And just like I said in my Lost World review, I feel like if you have experience with stop motion, it can help you get an even greater appreciation for the film. I also recommend that you watch some of the behind the scenes after viewing the movie, just to get an idea of what the filmmakers had to go through to get King Kong made. There's so much information about this movie out there. I could have added even more in this review, but if I crammed it all into one video, it would wind up being just as long as the featured film.
The one thing that can never be denied is the influence this movie had on pop culture and cinema history. Have you seen this movie? If you have, let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below.
Now, as many of you may know, over the years, King Kong has had many sequels, remakes, and even crossovers, and I do plan on covering just about all of them. Well, eventually. Some of them sooner, some of them quite a bit later. I haven't really got it all worked out yet. But there is one thing that I do know for sure, and that is that this movie is a heck of a lot better than the last Giant Ape movie I reviewed. Anyways, that's all I've got to say. Hope you all enjoyed. See you later. Sayonara. Bye.